It is unfortunate, but the vast majority of Americans have not been properly educated about the Constitution and the true history of this country. For example, were you aware that America is now operating under what is called Admiralty law, which is in fact international law or law of the sea? This Admiralty jurisdiction has been in effect within America for a number of generations now, but it hasn't always been that way. Originally, our forefathers created this country in such a way that each state is an independent nation, as well as a republic that existed under the control of the people. Instead of law of the sea, we had what is called continental jurisdiction, or law of the land. This law of the land was known as common law. Now, common law, which is land jurisdiction, is entirely different from what you may be familiar with or what you will see down at the courthouse. Judge, I have no association or authority with this statutory system. After this video is released, you will find that there are many distractors that will attack who I am or what I am, as well as making outrageous accusations in order to confuse you and distract you from the message. If they are successful in putting the focus on the messenger, the message will be lost and not heard. Therefore, regardless of your thoughts as to my status, I hope that you will listen to the message presented to you and judge the message for the content. In the statutory court system, this is how things work. If you have a strong case, you argue the law. If you have a questionable case, you argue precedents. But if you have no case, you attack the person. That is the strategy as to why they attack the messenger. You can rest assured that the more that they attack the messenger, the greater is the importance of the message they are trying to suppress. The message contained in this series of videos is about having a constitutional government that is accountable to the people, the rights of the people to have a government that serves the people, and a judiciary system that is fair and protects the people. Our forefathers who created this country understood that not only was government needed, but one of the primary functions of the government was to protect the rights and liberties of the people, while at the same time being accountable to the people that created the government. Do you think that there is any level of government today that is actually accountable to the people? The next most important item that you need to understand is that all government and all government agencies, even the court system, are all for-profit corporations. Let me repeat that because it is so important for you to understand. All governments in America, from the city level to the county, from the state and to the federal level, are all corporations that provide governmental services and pretending to be the legitimate government. In fact, all agencies within any government are nothing more than subcorporations of the primary corporation. It was made very clear in the Federalist Papers that a government must never become a corporation. This is because the public servants will then serve the corporation and not the people. Isn't this the attitude of what we see today within all levels of the government? The third most important item that you need to understand is that the Constitution is actually a limiting contract. A contract created by the people in order to keep the government in check. At this point, you should easily be able to see how the federal government, your state government, and the county governments, as well as city, have all breached that contract. Now, have you ever just looked around and thought to yourself that something is wrong within your city, within your county or your state or the federal government? You watch on television and you see across the nation that the people are no longer protected by the police. You see codes and regulations being passed at every level of government that take away or strip you of your rights, your freedoms, and your liberties. In Harney County, Oregon, you witnessed peaceful protesters demonized and even accused of being domestic terrorists. You watched as a peaceful American man, a good father, and a good husband, doing only good work within his community and for others. A man who was specifically and ruthlessly assassinated by the corporate government, who in turn tried to cover up their lawless actions and guilt. This isn't the first time the government has murdered Americans. How many of you remember the government murdering the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas? 86 children. In Idaho, the Ruby Ridge incident. And now, Robert Lavoy Finicum in Oregon, just to name a few. At the same time, the government propaganda machine would then pump out lie after lie to the public. Do you remember ever having heard the truth concerning any government incident from mainstream television? It has always been the alternative news sources that provide the truth. They would show the public exactly how the mainstream news had either covered up the truth or they just promote the lie. There are many examples of that. You watched in Oregon and Nevada as the Bundys and other Americans were intentionally painted by the media as being crazed domestic militants that were violent and dangerous, whereas the facts proved otherwise. The Bundys were standing firmly on the ground of the Constitution, whereas it was the government that was breaking the law and bringing violence against the people. The Malheur Refuge occupation was peaceful and nonviolent, yet because they stood their ground with the Constitution, they are now incarcerated and placed in solitary confinement, brutally treated and abused by the state and federal employees. The Constitution says that you are innocent until proven guilty, yet these men have been treated as if they were criminals convicted by the lawless statutory system. These Americans that stood up with the Constitution in their hand were tried and convicted by the media in favor of the government that perpetually breaks their own laws. Concerning the Malheur Refuge occupation, these men and women's only real crime was to peacefully and non-violently demand constitutional accountability of the government for breaking the law concerning the Hammonds, whereas the government unlawfully put the Hammonds back in jail to serve a second time for the same crime. This is called double jeopardy, and it is illegal. The refuge occupiers also brought America's attention to the BLM theft of land in the West, as well as the terroristic tactics the BLM was using against the American ranchers. If you study the indictment made against the people arrested for the Malheur occupation, even the most naive can tell that they committed no real crime. You can easily see that all of the charges were contrived and are without merit. The fact of the matter is this: the wrong people are the ones in jail. While these peaceful, nonviolent protesters are in jail, being treated as if they were convicted criminals, you watch the violent rioters in major cities go unchecked as they smash windows, burn cars, they loot the stores, and they attack anyone that gets in the way. And still, these violent rioters are not considered to be terrorists. Excuses are made for their violent behavior and actions. They are just frustrated citizens allowed to vent their anger. No action was ever taken against the multitude of rioters caught on video. A few years ago, you saw the Occupy Wall Street movement and other Occupy groups take over buildings for months at a time. They caused over $1 million in damages and cleanup costs, yet they were never classified as domestic terrorists, nor were they arrested. Is this painting an interesting picture for you? Notice the difference. The rioters and the Occupy Wall Street never mentioned government accountability or the Constitution. We have been lulled into the complacency of ignorance and denial, a state of apathy or fear caused by generations of media propaganda and dumbing down educational programs from the government-controlled schools. Now, this is not new, as it has been happening slowly and steadily for generations. In a newly released book titled The Confessions of Congressman X, the author, who is actually a Democratic congressman, stated, Washington, D.C. is a sinkhole of leeches. He then goes on to talk about how the politicians view the voters. Voters are incredibly ignorant, he says. It's far easier than you think to manipulate a nation of naive, self-absorbed sheep who crave instant gratification. Naive, self-absorbed sheep who crave instant gratification. How do you think we got this way? Through hundreds of hours in front of the television, or through the government-controlled educational system, perhaps? The following statement is very important for you to hear, and that he goes on to say, America is on an irreversible decline, and no one in Washington, D.C. seems to care. Other than getting elected and collecting your money, the politicians really don't care about America, your freedoms, your rights, or the Constitution. You and we have been sold out. You're told that if you don't like how your elected representatives are doing, then you have the choice of every 2 years or 4 years to select a different politician. In all this time, has changing politicians ever improved your status or America? Every year more laws are passed and life becomes far more restrictive in every possible way. Every year we lose more and more of our liberties and freedoms. But to what end? We are no safer, and the economy is failing. Are you aware that there are over 40 million federal laws on the books? Can you possibly follow that many laws? In reality, there's far more than 40 million. Under the statutory jurisdiction, there is not one man or woman in the United States over the age of 18 who cannot be indicted for some federal crime right now, right this instant. Did you know that on any given day, you probably violate at least 3 federal laws without even knowing it? Please remember, it was we the people, that created the government to serve the people. The government was not created so that the people serve the government. That is the meaning of the phrase, by the people and for the people. It's quite crystal clear. When you vote, does your vote count? Popular vote does not elect the president. If it did, then Al Gore would have been president. Many claim that your vote counts at the local level. But does it? Who controls the voting machine that tallies the vote? The government. Who votes? Who watches over those people that control the voting machines? Again, it's not the people, it is the government, and the government has its own itinerary and desires that does not include the people. At what point did the people give the government the authority to control the voting? This is not in the Constitution. Or did they just take it away from the people? Think about this. Who publishes the voting pamphlets and controls which candidate will catch your eye, or who is placed on the back of the pamphlet where you don't see them? These are standard marketing techniques used to manipulate your vote. So can your vote really count on the local level when you have been manipulated by standard marketing techniques used to control your vote? How often do the people vote on something and then the courts just overturn your vote? It actually happens a lot. Here are a couple of recent examples in Josephine County, Oregon. In May 2016, after the people in Josephine County, Oregon, overwhelmingly voted to ban GMO crops, a judge overturned the vote or the will of the people in favor of the corporation that wanted to force GMO products upon the people of Josephine County. In essence, the people had no vote. In another recent event in Josephine County, the same judge once again overturned the people's decision to even be able to vote on a land rights issue. The judge was very specific. He stated, "The people have no right to decide any land use issues." So where are your rights? What rights do you have? Once again, the corporate government has made it clear that the people have little to no control over their government or even their lives. All levels of government have made it very clear that you, as an American, have few rights other than those privileges that they, the government, allows you to have. But it is not too late to open your eyes and wake up. All it takes is some awareness of what is going on around you and asking a lot of questions. You see, if you live in the city or in the rural areas and watch mainstream television, you are fed a continuous stream of propaganda. Information, or what they want you to believe, is being repeated again and again, supporting the claimed authority of the government while taking away or minimizing the rights of the people. It is a psychological fact that if you repeat a message enough times, eventually the majority of people will believe the message regardless if it is true or not. And these psychological tactics are being used against you and your children at all levels of government daily. These tactics were used extensively to manipulate the public belief system during the Eastern Oregon nonviolent occupation. The false message put out by the mainstream media through the approval of the Government Information and Propaganda Corps, and that many came to believe, was that the occupiers were bad, gun-toting, violent people, and that the government forces were protecting the public. What a pack of lies that was. yet so many people believed it. As we Americans like to believe that we are the freest in the world, that we have more rights and liberties than anybody. But have you ever considered exactly what rights and liberties you actually have? And where does those rights and liberties come from? For example, you have no rights when it comes to your children because the government claims ownership of your children. That's right. They claim ownership of your children. Where are your parental rights? If the government does not like the way you are raising your children or what you are teaching your children at home, they simply come in through Child Protective Services and take your children away. More often than not, you will never see your children again when that happens. Where are your rights when the government claims ownership over your very own children? What can you do when the government takes away your children and you are helpless to do anything to protect them? It really doesn't matter as to what economic or social level that you are. The government has claimed ownership of your children. They do it through the marriage license, a contract giving the government ownership to all products of your union. A marriage license is a contract between you, your wife, and the government, with the government in the superior position of control, whereas you and your wife are subordinate parties in that contract. A few years ago, the government passed a law known today as Obamacare. It has become a nightmare of financial burden upon the American people. You lose your family insurance, and the cost for medical care has increased substantially. And again, you still have no rights because the government has forced you to participate, whether you like it or not. Where are your rights? Do you know where your rights and liberties come from? How many people believe that your rights come from the Constitution? This is a major misconception that so many Americans have been misled to believe. The truth is, all of your unalienable rights and liberties came into existence the day you were born. The Constitution is nothing more than a piece of paper that was created by the people. It cannot bestow or remove any rights because it is nothing more than a contract created to control and limit the powers of government, not the people. The Constitution restricts the government from overreach, and it requires the government to protect very specific rights. That is what the Bill of Rights are. So is it no wonder that the government wants to abolish the Constitution? Think about it. Why do you think that the Constitution is no longer taught in school? Why is the Constitution not found within the statutory court system? Could it be that the statutory system considers the Constitution to be a subversive document that blocks their quest to suppress and control the American people? Governmental and jurisdictional lawlessness is perpetuated upon and against the American people from the city level to the federal level. The purpose of this magnitude of lawlessness is quite simple: to control the American people, to strip the wealth and the labor from the American people, and to steal the wealth of the land from the American people. In order to exert control over America, there is a tried and true process that is used time and time again. The government creates a crisis, often referred to as a false flag incident. This creates a state of fear and panic among the American people. The government then miraculously comes forward with a solution. But of course, the solution always has a price, such as some loss of rights or freedoms. Yet over time, these small losses of liberties and freedoms accumulate to eventually give the government absolute control over the people by which they consented. In other words, the American people have been tricked into giving up their rights and liberties for the illusion of safety by the government. Historically, any person or group that has tried to educate the public on what is happening and expose the true lawless nature of the government has been viciously attacked in such a way as to discredit the person, destroy their reputation, and label them as a conspiracy theorist. Furthermore, this same corporate government has also made it a crime for any American to expose the unconstitutional and coercive tactics that are used against the American people. Does the name Edward Snowden come to mind as an example of this happening? In addition to personal attacks against these whistleblowers and educators, unconstitutional agencies such as the FBI infiltrate groups in order to create dissent, chaos, and confusion among the members while discrediting and fragmenting the group publicly. This is your government at work. The incident of the Malheur refuge occupation has brought to light the abusive actions of another unconstitutional federal agency we know as the BLM. This involved the rights of the ranchers in eastern Oregon having their property and grazing rights stolen from them by this agency. The BLM is an agency that has in essence declared war on the ranchers in order to take control and steal the land in order for government to strip the mineral wealth for themselves. Greed never stops. The ranchers, with the help of Robert Lavoie Finicum, were peacefully standing up against this unconstitutional theft of their lawful land and grazing rights from the BLM. The Bundys brought forward a legal and lawful demand for the constitutional right of the redress of grievances concerning the lawless actions of the BLM and the unlawful actions of the federal government in practicing double jeopardy by putting the Hammonds back in jail a second time after they had already served their time as originally established by the court. For those that are aware of the events that occurred, the government propaganda machine was placed into full force in order to keep the truth and reality of what was happening from the public. In fact, it has been reported that an FBI information officer was placed within the management of the Oregonian newspaper who approved or disapproved any and all articles published, making sure that all articles were in favor of the government and negative towards the lawful protesters. Have you noticed how the news media never reported anything about the city of Burns being occupied by the FBI armed forces along with other unidentified armed personnel? Did you notice that the media failed to report about the FBI going out and terrorizing ranchers? In fact, in one specific case, they threw the rancher on the ground, placing their boot on his neck and threatening him body injury if he talked. The city of Burns was 30 miles away from the refuge, yet it was taken over and occupied at gunpoint by the FBI, whereas the people of Burns and the surrounding ranchers were unjustly terrified and abused by these occupiers. Yes, there were hundreds of peaceful militia present, But the people were not afraid of the militia. The people were afraid of the FBI and others that threatened the people and pointed loaded guns in the faces of the people. The FBI, including what we suspect to be contract mercenaries, forcibly took over a public school building, placing snipers on the roof and barricaded other public buildings, all the while restricting any public access to these public buildings. In contrast, 30 miles away at the refuge, the public was freely going in and out of the refuge facility. In fact, many people stated on the record that they felt safer at the refuge than they did within the occupied city of Burns. Their fear was because of the armed FBI occupation. When Burns had a severe snowstorm, it was the peaceful militia people that helped the city of Burns by digging out the fire hydrants and helping the local people, while the government forces stood by doing absolutely nothing other than pointing their loaded guns at the people. The FBI and government-paid mercenaries were not there for the public safety. Instead, they were there to protect the corporate government's interests from the people. The fear and terror created by the occupation of the city of Burns by the FBI and unknown contractors operating under the FBI banner prompted the people of Burns to find a nonviolent solution that is based upon historical precedents and the founding documents of our country. Since the government forces were the ones abusing the people, it was up to the people to protect themselves from the abuse of the government. With that, a town hall meeting was called and a committee of safety was formed. The committee of safety is basically a formal people's assembly where the people of the city or county come together without government intervention to discuss issues and decide upon actions by the people and for the people. The first prominent act of the Committee of Safety was to draft a document that I personally delivered to the Oregon National Guard Provost Marshal's office. Now that document specified that the people of Burns, Oregon made a request of the assistance of the Provost Marshal, which is a branch of the Oregon National Guard military police. They were requesting military police to assist in the restoration of law and order within the city of Burns and the removal of the unwelcomed occupiers and domestic terrorists known as the FBI and the other known associated forces. Judge Grasty and Sheriff Ward, operating against the people, allowed the continued terrorization of the people. In fact, they barricaded themselves up so that nobody could even talk to them or confront them for their actions. Many people may, at this point, believe that the FBI is here to protect Americans. But if you actually look at the historical actions of the FBI, the purpose and missions of the FBI is not to protect the people, but to protect the lawless government from the people. The people of Burns, Oregon specifically requested the assistance of the Provost Marshal of the Oregon National Guard because they were in fear of their lives and property. This request was personally handed and delivered, yet the Army Oregon National Guard, under the command of Major General Michael Stensel and under the control of Oregon Governor Kate Brown, refused to act or protect the people of Burns, Oregon. As many are well aware, this situation continued to escalate under the orders of the federal government as well as the approval of Governor Brown, a situation that culminated in the arrest of a multitude of peaceful people as well as the brutal murder and assassination of Robert Lavoy Finicum. After the arrest and assassination, the Oregon government conducted its own investigation, which of course made an attempt to exonerate itself of any unlawful activities. At the same time, the Oregon legislature secretly made an attempt to push through a bill that would allow all participants of this heinous crime to remain in secret. If this can happen in one small city in Oregon, what will stop this from happening in others? What will stop this from happening in your city, your county, or your state? Because of the high level of fear from government reprisal that continues to this day, many of the people of Burns, Oregon are far too scared to stand up or testify against the daily abuses that occurred and continue to occur among the ranchers and the people at the hands of the FBI, the state police, the county sheriff, and others. Where are the rights and liberties of the people of Burns, Oregon? Where are the rights of the Lavoy Finicum family when the government assassinated Lavoy? Lavoy Finicum's only crime, as well as the Bundys and others, was to stand up with the Constitution in hand, demanding government accountability and a constitutional redress of their grievances. So where is the right of the Oregon ranchers to live peacefully without governmental interference or the fear of government reprisal? Where are the rights of the Bundys and the other people that peacefully stood up against the government's unlawful and unconstitutional actions against the people of Oregon? When we Americans are faced with the unlawful actions of our government against us, what is our recourse? Will our great-grandchildren have a country where they are required to carry papers with them at all times? Where all of the activities and movements will be monitored and analyzed? Where they will not be allowed to learn anything outside of the government programming facilities, once known as kindergarten through college? What kind of overlord governmental control are you willing to accept and pass on to the future generations? What is our recourse? What is our remedy? How do we restrain this corporate government from enacting illegal wars and toppling governments internationally without the consent of the people, let alone stopping them from stealing our inalienable rights as a sovereign people? What is our recourse? My friends, we have been fooled, we have been lied to, and we have been taught inaccurate information within our schools. Our children have been programmed in these government schools and through television programs not to think or to question the government. We have had our heritage and true history slowly changed and stolen from us. For generations now, our children have not been taught about the original Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, which are still in effect, and other critical founding documents such as the Magna Carta. So how do we stop a government that perpetually resorts to violence against the American people and strips Americans of their birthright and their liberties? A government that steals thousands of our children without cause, ripping them from good families and homes. Children who disappear from the foster care system, never to be found. How do we stop a government that continues to decimate and steal the productivity and labor and the livelihood of America? while many Americans struggle just to survive? Do you actually believe that you will find a remedy or justice within their corporate statutory system? Do you actually believe that your politicians will give you a remedy? Do you understand that when you go into a statutory courtroom, you enter a for-profit corporate court? A court where you will never find the Constitution or your rights, where justice is based upon the best advantage for the corporate courts, not equity and not equality. And you won't find justice for the people. It is also important to understand that all judges and lawyers are esquires. Esquires are a title of British nobility, a position of British nobility that does not constitutionally or lawfully exist within the United States. Yet they have control of the judicial system. So what do we do when the government that was created by the people and for the people, including the judiciary, now operate against the people? My friends, the remedy is not another civil war. The remedy was given to us through the wisdom of the men that formed and created this country. It is found within the very documents that they used and brought forward during the creation of this constitutional republic. That remedy is the return of the constitutional republic system that our forefathers originally gave us. As America teeters upon the precipice, the organic and original non-corporate constitution that protects our inalienable rights and liberties and holds the government in check is hanging by a thread. The solution may not be perfect in every way, because we are still learning the truth and the correct process as was passed on to us from our founding fathers on how to deal with what we face today. As the city of Burns, Oregon was being occupied and tyranny prevailed, when the people found themselves betrayed by the governor, betrayed by the sheriff, and betrayed by the provost marshal, and even Major Stencil, the people of Harney County took the only action that was available to them. When there is no longer any justice to be had, when the government no longer listens to the people who created it, when the government protects only itself from the people, when people live in fear of the government rather than being in control of the government, it is time to return to the original system created and given to us by our founders. America needs to know that what is happening today is that the statutory system codified common law in order to control it. Once they codified common law and brought it into their corporate system, it was no longer for and of the people. Therefore, when we talk about common law, you have to differentiate between federal common law and constitutional or people's common law. The two different jurisdictions do not mix and are not compatible with each other. The proper lawful jurisdiction upon this continental United States, as given by the Founding Fathers, is land jurisdiction or people's common law. Therefore, the only remedy for America is the return of the people's common law system and the unilateral unincorporating of all governments and agencies, bringing back assemblies and independent lawful grand juries. Grand juries as prescribed by law constitutionally that are totally independent of any influence or are under the control of the statutory courts, lawyers, or judges. I thank you for listening and hope that you focus upon the message that is here for you to understand and act upon. Please continue on to the next video that will present more information.